Love and Monsters is a monster adventure film that was going to be released in theatres worldwide by Paramount Pictures, but due to the pandemic, its release was mainly digital. Netflix has recently released it on its platform and it has received good reviews, especially for its VFX that have even received an Oscar nomination. Mr. X, Milfilm were given the complicated task of creating post-apocalyptical Earth full of mutated animals that had to be larger than life but still remain realistic. One of the more intricate and complicated monsters was the hell crab. As the sequence was on a beach, the crab was going to be full of sunlight. So in addition to ensuring that the CG crab was correctly illuminated, the team also had to make sure they added enough texture and detail to make the crab complex enough to look real. They added barnacles and seaweed. They even went as far as to add a plastic six-pack ring caught on the crab, and the crab trap he was caught in before he mutated attached to one of his legs. Once they had created a believable crab, they now had to make us believe the crab was on the beach interacting with the actors. This was achieved by using a variety of practical effects during principal photography. An excavator with its arm wrapped in blue screen material was used for the outhouse destruction scene, and additional CG debris were added in post to marry the CG crab into the scene. A variety of different cables and harnesses attached to a forklift were used for the shots where the crab dragged the protagonist and lifted him up. Other wires were used to turn him and make sure he hit all his marks during the shots. In the shots where the crab chops sand into his face, the team basically did just that. They loaded an air cannon with sand and shot at him. For the last shot in the scene, the VFX team had to convey a complex series of emotions just by using the crab's eyes. They had to create a menacing monster, but also an understanding and empathy. They achieved this by combining a pensive squinting of the eyelids with an opening and dilation of the pupils to convey understanding, and by balancing the moisture of eyes to convey sadness and intelligence. This team's spec for the pole frog was, think of the fattest frog you can, times it by 4 and then add boils. The VFX team drew on Monty Python's Mr. Creosote for inspiration for what they called a joyously grotesque giant frog. As with the hell crab, a variety of practical effects were used to marry the CG frog with the live action footage. Artificial algae and slimy frog spawn were added to the pond's flagstones to simulate its abandonment. Different cables and rigs were used to pull the protagonist into the fence. Another was tied to his leg and disguised to simulate the frog's tongue as it dragged him across the ground. And a different one was used for one of the stunt dogs to bite down on. This was the first creature the team received designs for, and that was on the first day of shooting, dubbed the nastiest and hungriest of all the creatures. This scene was carefully storyboarded in order to be sure where the CG sand gobbler would be in the shot, and making sure that the shot was framed properly. This was dubbed the most challenging creature because of the complex rigging and intersection avoidance involved in animating it. It was also decided in post-production that they had to change her design to make her larger and scarier. The VFX team scaled her up to 35 feet long and added some extra limbs. They also had to alter the actual action of the scene to accommodate her larger size into the frames that had been shot in principal photography. total of 13 unique CG monsters were created for this film, and each was designed to appear like a larger mutated version of the terrestrial animals we are used to and have its own personality traits without appearing too otherworldly. This was a complex balance that was achieved by pairing the set location perfectly to the CG monster that supposedly lived there. In order to sell the feeling that the human population had been largely reduced and subdued, and that nature had run wild for 7 years, the team had to select their locations very well. Thanks to the fact that large parts of it still remain untouched and wild, Australia was the perfect location. This being said, the crew did have to add plants and props to simulate 7 years with little human interference. The set they had to do the most on was the Beach Cove set. They needed a cove that they could use for 2 weeks of filming without having to worry about tides. They ended up using a beachside park. They removed the grass, park benches and tables, and then brought in cranes, forklifts, excavators, blue screens, props, and 600 tons of sand. Please give us a like if you enjoyed this video, don't forget the links to the music used in this video in the video description, and let us know in the comment section which movie VFX you'd like to see behind next. Thanks for watching.